Hey, welcome back to the Motorcyclist Podcast. This is where we talk about motorcycles and what makes them great. Topics on this show constantly change, but one thing that always remained is two-wheel fun. On this episode, we're going to talk about the 2025 MotoGP season. It just kicked off, and it's already pretty exciting in some respects. Some other ways, it's pretty predictable, but we're going to get into the racing, the teams, the riders, and all the action that happened last weekend. But before we do that, we got to make introductions. We got editor Adam Wahid. We've got the editor-in-chief of UTV Driver, Aaron Richardson, with us, and you've got myself, executive editor Justin Dawes. Aaron is a addition for this episode. He works in the Octane media space with the rest of us, and he works on some motorcyclists projects as well. So, Aaron, tell us what you're doing with Motorcyclist, and then let's just talk about your motorcycle life in general.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm extremely excited to be here. So I've been in the four-wheel space here at Octane UTV Driver for like the last almost 4 years now. But this year, I'm getting the opportunity to work on our Ranwin Parked series. So some of you may have seen some of the early couple episodes of that with Mark Hoyer, who's been working on a Yamaha XS 650. I'm actually going to be, I've started restoring a 79 Yamaha XT 500 for the channel. So, and ours is interesting because it's a complete basket case. Mark's needed a carb clean, a little bit of gas, and it fired right off. The XT literally needs everything. Not to give too much away, but in the first episode, I had the engine out of the bike.
Awesome.
That's gonna be a project. We got a couple more 3-episode arc on that. So doing that, and then just in general, I've been into motorcycles for 15 years now, probably, and I kind of got a late start, and so to compensate for that, I basically bought everything I could see as long as it was used. So I currently have 8 bikes, and I've had everything from, old Yamaha FZR 600s to Kawasaki GPZ 750s and everything in between. So, haven't touched BMWs or Harleys yet, but that's the last 2 frontiers for me. So
awesome.
Yeah, and we're just getting into riding season here in Virginia, so I'm starting to get pretty excited to get my own fleet back on the road.
Good. What's the plan for the XT once it's done? What are you going to do with it?
So we're planning, there are a couple of ideas. The big one is we want to do the Vintage 1000 Rally, which is, this guy puts them on East Coast, Midwest, and then West Coast. And so in August, they're doing one in the Smoky Mountains right by the UTV Driver headquarters, in a town called Chattanooga in Tennessee. And it's 1,000-mile loop out in the boonies around the Smoky Mountains. The Smokies are some of the most remote and wild places on the East Coast, certainly in the South. And, even in August, where the rest of the South is sweltering, the Smokies can have fall weather because of the elevation changes. So it's going to be a pretty exciting thing. And to take, a 50-year-old bike almost on that ride is going to take some guts and take more than a little bit of wrenching. So that's the plan.
Bring a big toolkit.
Yep, big toolkit and some carb cleaner, and we'll see how we go.
Awesome, cool. Well, that's exciting. We're looking forward to it. Mark's
me too.
First episodes of Ranwin Parked were pretty rad. Redoing the XS, and the audience definitely responded to it. So it's a cool series, and we're excited to see more bikes on it for sure. So, myself and Adam, we like newer stuff. we like push button. So I'll work on some stuff, but man, I don't like basket cases. And I think that's the only way the XT 500s come these days, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, you guys can have your push buttons and your computers and all that stuff is great. I like things I can afford. And so, if I got to put in a little bit of elbow grease to make a running bike, then that's the way it goes.
Well, that's the reason we work in the field we work in, Adam and I, because we don't have to pay for bikes. See, you got UTVs, you got 4 wheels that you don't have to pay for.
Right. I just can't go get coffee on mine, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That'll come.
Maybe move to Arizona. Arizona, put a license plate on it.
There you go.
Don't believe for a second. I haven't thought of that.
Yeah. So I guess we should explain. UTV Driver is our UTV outlet. UTVs, if you don't know, are gigantic 4-wheel ATVs, 2 seats. We used to call them side by sides. Now it's changed to UTV. And they're a ton of fun. And if you haven't tried one, you should go get in a seat, because it's like budget trophy trucks for the sport machines. Like, it's unbelievable what those things can do. And then you've got runs the gamut all the way to like full work machines that can help you out on your farm and, carry a ton of weight and make your life easier.
And honestly, even the work machines, like, if you can't afford a rally car, you can afford a UTV. And like, even the ones that are pure work, like, I don't know, the skinny pedal on the right still works. And like, they're fun to hustle. It's almost even more fun to hustle them because they don't really do what they're supposed to.
Right. Yeah. They still boogie for sure. So, yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Let's get into what we always do. We kick off every episode talking about what we've been riding. So, since you're the guest of honor on this one, Aaron, what have you been riding recently?
Well, it's been wintertime, so not a ton. I did manage to get out on my KTM 525 on New Year's Day. We had like a Bluebell day randomly, so I got out on that. And then a couple weeks ago, I actually bought a Gas TXT 280. So I've been trying not to break my tailbone on that thing. I'm new to trials riding. I've been on a 2-stroke a few times. I used to have a 2-stroke dirt bike, but trials are a whole different thing. So that's been a completely, I feel like a new rider, which is cool. I think that's a good thing to feel every once in a while, to kind of get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Where'd you find that bike at?
A buddy of mine had it, and he wanted to let it go for cheap. So
perfect. That's awesome. Yeah. I love trials bikes. They teach you how bad you are at riding technical things.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I figure it's a great exercise in balance, and like everything is knowing where traction is and how to find it. And, trials bike can't teach you a lot about too many things, but it can definitely help you find traction and keep your balance. So I'm hoping to leverage that here.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I need a trials bike refresher for me. I've been riding hard enduro. This weekend I did an enduro.
Nice.
On my KTM, and it was a lot of hill climbing and big technical rocks and slippery downhills, and hit the ground more than a few times. But super fun. We rode in this valley that the whole riding area was basically like in a gigantic enclosed valley, capped at both ends, and everything was just steep. It was like we were riding to Machu Picchu the whole time. So super fun, super rad, lots of dumps and falls, but overall a great time. So what about you, Adam?
Any bent levers or anything, or everything was okay?
No. The only thing that got messed up was me. I did fall down. I was climbing like off the side of a very steep hill. It was kind of going diagonally up the hill, and it was so steep I bogged from in second. It was so steep, so I went to first, and I was really light on the lever, and it went into neutral instead of first.
Oh no.
And then I fell down the hill, and the bike followed me and was tumbling, and I put my arm up to block it, and the foot peg got me right there.
Oh jeez.
And I was like, oh no, did I break my arm? It's not swollen that much anymore, but it was that day, like my forearm or my right arm was about twice the size of my left arm. And I was like, oopsie.
Yeah, been there. That sucks.
But still toughed it out, still rode, and still had a great time. And so. But the bike was fine because it used me as a cushion. So
yeah, the good thing about that slow stuff is usually you don't really bend stuff when you have little tip overs here and there.
Usually not. Luckily, it was only a few tumbles before it caught up to me. Instead of some of those like hill climb videos you see like in Austria where it's like an impossible hill climb and everyone just cartwheels their bikes and you just watch them just self-destruct as they're going down the hill, just parts flying off, and you're like, ooh, subframe, ooh, pipe, oh. Handlebars. Oh,
I selfishly love watching those videos.
Oh, I love them. I love watching them. They're amazing.
It's funny too because you'll watch them, and you're like, "Oh, that looks easy. Oh, that's easy," and you like see them cartwheeling. You're like, "Oh, it's not easy at all."
No, it's not easy at all. Yeah, and I took my GoPro with me, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna watch this crash over. It's gonna look so gnarly." And it's like, you know how GoPro is. It just flattens everything out, and the steepest thing looks like a walking trail. And I was like, well, that sucks. I'm not even gonna share that with anybody. Like,
yeah, the wide angle really has a way of ruining your awesome story.
It does. It's such a bummer. So, what about you, Adam? What have you been riding?
Well, I went on my final ride on KTM's trusty 2024 890 Adventure R middleweight adventure bike, which I really like. So, final ride on that thing. That thing's gone back to KTM North America now. But geez, I really enjoy riding that bike. It just does everything. But as I was putting it away, it has so much plastic on it, so much plastic. And then, not that the other manufacturers aren't using a lot of plastic, because they are, but not to knock on KTM, but that plastic or resin or whatever they use, it's not at the same quality as the Japanese manufacturers.
It's definitely, they built it like a dirt bike, right? It's got the same plastic composition as their dirt bikes. So I guess they expect you to replace them a lot and fall on them and crash them and all that kind of stuff. There's no shiny paint on an 890 Adventure R anywhere. It's all plastic, all decals. And it's built for the person that wants to ride super gnarly and just beat the crap out of the bike and replace stuff a lot, I guess.
What's the MSRP on that bike, Adam?
It's like $15,000, right around there.
That's a lot to pay for a bike that somebody expects you to throw down a hill. You know what I mean? With 100 horsepower.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it does come with a lot of performance and a lot of suspension badness that other ones don't come with. So you're trading the gloss paint and the niceties maybe that make you happy to look at it in the garage. For the performance. So, I mean, it's the bike you can throw in your garage, and they're ugly motorcycles. So who cares if it isn't shiny, because the shapes, I think paint would make the shapes maybe even look worse. So let's just not paint it and just kind of.
You don't like the praying mantis style either?
Nope. Never have.
Yeah, I don't
never
either.
have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I apologize. Craig Dent. I know you were the impetus behind the insect style style of KTM. Craig Dent, he doesn't work at Kiska anymore, but he was the guy that designed like all the pointy crazy shapes, and now he's moved on to his own design company. And Craig's a cool dude, loves to ride mountain bikes. He's a super rad ripper guy, but sorry, Craig, style's not for me.
I mean, you can buy a Norton and send your money to the same company if you want a pretty bike.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Yep. So, and Norden is definitely more pretty, but still a lot of plastic on it.
Yes, for sure. Lots of plastic. I only say that because I had it parked outside for more than a few days, and I swear to God, in just a few days, the plastic changed color from the UV exposure to the sun.
Oh wow, gnarly!
A Japanese bike would not do that, but KTM, I swear to gosh, like the plastic looked different. I'm like, oh man,
it's the hole in the ozone above your house heat. What are you doing?
I guess the question I have before we move on from that is like, where's the delta between, like, where do you cross like people willing to spend $15,000 on a adventure bike and accept a certain level of like, fit and finish on the plastic, versus people who are spending that much money on a bike and expecting to get like an R1200? Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just curious where how many people are crossing over and buying that bike expecting,
I think,
not a dirt bike.
Yeah, I think there's not many. I think that they,
especially when you get to the 890R, maybe that's a different.
Yeah, when you get to the 890R, I think that it's different for the 12 or the 1390 now, different type of thing. But the BMW buyer and the KTM buyer, for the most part, are completely different riders, and they come from a different place. Like an F900 rider, maybe somebody that's a street rider that is moving into adventure bikes, And the KTM rider is someone that is a dirt bike rider that is moving into adventure bikes. So,
well, I mean, they all have 2118s on the KTM. Like, there's only a couple with street tires, and all the Beamers have.
Yeah, well, the F900 has 2118s as well, and I would say that the new F900 it's dope. It is so much better of a bike than the old 800. The old 800 was, or 850 or whatever, was pretty garbage.
That's the one I've ridden, so I need to get an F900.
No, an F900 is a huge step up, right, Adam?
Okay.
You rode one?
Yeah. We've ridden them a bunch. They're awesome. They're great bikes, But even the predecessor was okay too. But yeah, they're super awesome.
Yeah, they're super rad. Well, enough talking about adventure bikes because they have absolutely nada to do with. Well, I guess they don't. I guess we can talk about it in a little bit, but they don't have a whole lot to do with what we're going to be talking about today, which is MotoGP. So,
well, maybe a little bit in terms of electronics, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, electronics. Yeah, trickle down. Yeah, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So, before we get started on that, though, audience, give us some comments, give us some feedback on how we're doing, and put in the comments who you think is going to win the 2025 MotoGP championship and why. Like, give us some reasons why they're gonna win. So, with that though, let's start with like a primer of MotoGP. Most of you watching this podcast or listening to it, you're a motorcyclist reader or enthusiast, MotoGP, but for a quick primer that maybe someone is just jumping on this podcast has never heard of it, MotoGP is the premier road racing class in the world. It is basically the Formula One equivalent to motorcycle racing. Prototype class, the bikes have like 300 horsepower. Minimum weight that they can have is 348 pounds, and they get right to that minimum weight within the ounce or gram if you're going by the 100 and whatever it is, 52 kgs. Massive horsepower. We're talking a power weight ratio that is far exceeds a Formula One race car. So I have it in my notes here. A MotoGP bike has 0.86 horsepower per pound. Compare that to a Formula One car. Formula One car is 0.59 horsepower per pound. So massive difference, right? And the bikes are unbelievable, the handling and the ability of those bikes to lean. 65-degree lean angle on those motorcycles, which you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, most humans will say, like, when you're doing like any sort of human powered sport, the body does not like to lean more than about 20 degrees to the side. So that's like when you're rounding bases in baseball or you're barrel racing in rodeo or something like that. Like, you're only leaning over 20 degrees when you're like ripping around a corner, running as hard as you can. Bicycle gets a little bit further and stuff like that, but 65 degrees lean angle. That's like laying almost flat.
The dudes have shoulder sliders now.
Yeah,
Jorge Martin uses them.
Yes, he uses his whole forearm.
You'll see, his humerus will be on the deck in some places.
Absolutely.
And they're not even really trying. They just happen so naturally and effortlessly.
Yeah, they look so smooth most of the time.
Gonna go around the corner.
Yep, no big deal. So, other racing series, bikes lean over a long ways too, but not quite the same. World Superbike, we're talking like 60 degrees ish. And an average track day rider like me, 45 to 50 degrees. Way miles. Like those 15 degrees is a massive difference in lean angle.
Another cool thing is that the technology, eventually makes it to the production street bikes that we get to ride, on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the point you're making with the 890, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, eventually all that stuff, it takes a lot longer in the adventure bikes, but it does in some way, shape, or form, form the basis of the electronic controls for those vehicles. Just takes a while to get there.
You're talking like traction control, like rider aids is really obvious.
Yep.
So
traction control, cornering, ABS, the IMU powered quick shifters now, which is kind of crazy. You'd never really think that a quick shifter, an electronic quick shifter would need an IMU, but it just
Mm-hmm.
makes it even faster and that much more smooth when you up and downshift.
Yep.
Ducati's got winglets on their street bikes now, which is like literally straight out of the MotoGP paddock. Yeah.
So MotoGP, like, it's been probably a dozen years since winglets started showing up on MotoGP bikes. And when they started, they were like little tiny, like they were winglets. They were these little tiny outcroppings that, did a little bit of work. And now you look at the bikes and they look like they got a park bench plastered to the front of them. And they've got, yeah. Especially that Aprilia. Aprilia looks like almost a biplane front end, and they all have some sort of that. And then they've got, Venturis and other kind of winglets that, are on the side of the bike. So when the bike's leaned over, that wing starts to add downforce for helping with cornering. Most of the front aero is to keep the bikes from wheeling because they have 300 horsepower. You know what I mean? So not only are they pushing, adding downforce so the bike doesn't wheelie, then there's other things, adjustable ride height suspension. So they're hitting a button coming out of the corner and squatting the bike like a dragster to get out of the corner harder. So, which, that kind of adjustable suspension is already, it's showing up on adventure bikes again, which is the funny thing, right? So now you have adjustable ride height on adventure bikes. So when you come to a stop, the bike lowers automatically. And all that tech kind of came from MotoGP. So other things, like Ducati's counter rotating crankshafts, to help with cornering. That came from MotoGP. Now it's in their Panigale and V4. It's in all their V4 engines. So super rad. And then you got Ducati DVO, Ducati Vehicle Observer. It's like this new technology that is basically like almost predicting what the rider's going to do, and it helps the rider go around the corner. You know what I mean? Like it actually helps. It goes, okay, you're going around this corner, you're at this lean angle, I'm going to give you this much traction control, but I'm also going to add some brake here to help you tighten up the corner. And it knows what you're going to do before you do it, because they've got just piles and piles of data that they've got from racing. And now they're like, okay, this is what a MotoGP rider would do to get around a corner better. He's going to add rear brake here, he's going to crack the throttle here, he's going to, all those things, and the bike does it for you. It's amazing.
Great time to be a bike rider.
Yeah,
all the doodads.
Absolutely. So, super cool technology. It all trickles down, and it makes it much, much more awesome for riders.
I think it's wild too, because you're talking about DVO, which is essentially the street version of Ducati. Of all the GP bikes have GPS, like every track laid out, and they're adjusting literally every corner by corner, which I never thought would ever make it to a street bike, because how do you make that work? And it's a similar thing, now with the aero and the ride height devices, which we can talk about later, but are eventually going away. One of the arguments for taking those things off the bikes was like, well, how will that ever translate to the street? And they haven't quite figured that out yet, but it's like, if you can get DVO off of a MotoGP bike and make it work for the street rider, like anything on that bike can translate over. And I guess there's a counter argument for like, well, should it? But like, that's not the same thing as like, can you put it on on a Panigale and sell more bikes? And it's like, you absolutely can.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that before we get into kind of like the recap of last year's. That's an interesting argument, as some people are like, oh, it takes away the racing talent when the bikes have so much aero and so much technology. And like, I want to go back to a 2-stroke that, the traction controls at the wrist and that's it. You know what I mean? And yeah, that racing was exciting, but what's your guys' thought on, I guess, the olden days versus now?
If I may, I think I'm kind of, I hate to be wishy-washy, but I'm sort of halfway between, right? Because two things occur to me. One, this is motorcycling's Formula One, right? So these are pure prototype motorcycles. This is one of the only spheres on Earth where motorcycle designers are just let loose. Like, come up with what you can come up with. ask for forgiveness rather than permission. If the sanctioning body doesn't like it, they'll regulate it out, but like go nuts. And that's awesome. And it has bred some insanely fast motorcycles and stuff that has trickled down from the street. On the other hand, yeah, the competition side of me, like, I kind of agree with Casey Stoner where, like, I don't know. I mean, I'll never be able to ride a bike at that level no matter what I do. So it's hard for me to sit here and say, like, oh, well, it's taking away from the competition or the rider skill's not the same. It's like, I don't know, man. You want to tell me that someone like Fabio Di Giannantonio, who came up in the last 2 years, couldn't jump on a two-stroke and lap anyone in the A group at a track day? Like, give me a break. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think it's a little hard to, that's like when you get into who's the greatest rider of all time arguments. It's like, well, Mick Doohan had a different group of competitors than Rossi did, than Marquez did, and they all had different tech on the bike. And at the end of the day, what matters is how you utilize the equipment you've got. So I think that physically speaking, like, yeah, I want there to be dirty air behind a bike, clean air behind a bike so you can slipstream a little bit better. I want the thing to be a little bit more unstable in corners just because it looks cooler to watch. Like, you know, when a guy on a Suzuki has all this corner speed and the dude on the Yamaha has to back the thing in and V the corner off, that changes the calculation in the race. And rider skill's not part of that equation. I mean, it is, but like, I want the bikes to have to approach things differently. And I think the sort of Ducati era, the big V4s, all the aero, all the ride height devices, dropping the back end when they come out of a corner, like, you've essentially got dragsters that can turn. And so what that breeds is, like, everybody's going into a corner, wide in, late on the brakes, V the sucker off, you're on the brakes, like, skidding the back end to the apex, and then pin it. And, like, all the bikes do the same thing the same way, except for the Yamaha, which has a V4 or a inline four and can't win anything. Yeah. So, like, I think the argument is more like homogeneity is bad because you've got all these dudes who would be within a tenth of each other if you put them on equal machinery. And so, yeah, I think I want to see bikes have to do things different ways. Like, Ducatis used to have to do things different than Hondas, and now they all are the same.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the evolution, and we've seen those kind of plateaus where everything does the same all through MotoGP, or before when it was GP racing is you know, let's go back to, like, you know, the 50s and stuff, like, in 60s they were trying all kinds of different things and engine configurations, but then it all leveled out to this is what works, and then it levels out, and then we get to what we have now, and then somebody makes an innovation, and then everyone catches up, and then there's innovation, everyone catches up, and you know, there's a lot of, like, you know, people complaining about Ducati being so dominant, but they're putting in the work and they're being innovative, and they're pushing what they're doing, and that gives them an edge. And if the other manufacturers can't keep up, that's on them, and they'll eventually catch up, and they'll eventually figure it out. And, you know, when the rule book does change and the aero goes away and this goes away, Ducati's going to figure something else out. They're already working on it. They're already thinking about it. They're already looking at the rules and going, okay, how's this going to change? What are we going to do? Like, how do we get around this? How do we get around that? And Ducati has just been better at doing that than everybody else. And,
but that's only in the last, like, 5 years, right? Before that,
only the last 5 years. Before that, they couldn't figure it out.
Right. Before that, it was Honda. And I think this is, like, the 2027 thing, the rule change that's coming up excites me because it's a shakeup.
Yeah, it's a shakeup.
And, you know, some people are like, well, they need to cap the budget. Like, no, get out of here with that, because budget caps, all of those things, like, if you want budget caps, go watch World Superbike. But the same thing happens in World Superbike. They have, you know, budget controls in different classes, and the same thing happens from class to class to class. There is no class, unless it's like Moto3, where every bike is doing more or less the same thing, and, like, the rider makes the last 10th. Like, everything evolves this way. So all 2027 is going to do is shake it up, and it'll be different because different people will catch up with the new rules quicker or slower. But like, yeah, anyway.
I mean, the two-stroke days were super exciting for sure. The first years of four-stroke were exciting because everyone was figuring it out. Now, I still think that the racing is very exciting. It's just different, and they have to learn to use the tools a different way. And obviously, the Ducati GP 23, 24, 25 is just better at it than every other manufacturer's bike.
Yeah. And if you want to talk about exciting before we move on to GP, this year's GP, like in 4 to 8, Mick Doohan won everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like
everything.
Sorry, like 95% of it. Yeah, it was just like he got on the bike and he ripped off, and like, do you want to sit there and watch that? Like, no. And then 2002 in the bad old days when Rossi switched to or 2004 when he switched to the Yamaha and 4-strokes, he won everything. So there's this mythos that like, oh, racing used to be more exciting. It's like, yeah, if you didn't look 10 seconds up the road where Valentino Rossi was, sure, there was some interesting stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And the same with, the early Marquez era. Yeah. If the camera didn't follow Marc Marquez, the racing was exciting, but that didn't have as much to do with the rules as it had to do with like, generational talents show up and just run circles around everybody. Like,
exactly. I don't know. Yep. So, well, let's recap the 24 season real quick.
Let's do that,
and then we will jump into the 25. So,
okay. So the TLDR on the 2024 season was Ducati won everything. I'm just looking at the results real quick on my cheat sheet here. Ducati had the top 4 positions in the championship. Mm-hmm. And then they had 8 bikes on the grid. So like that was part of it. But, Jorge Martin kind of shocked the world last year by winning the championship on a satellite bike, which the long and the short of it is they don't have quite the resources that the factory team does. So it was a little bit of an underdog story. And he won the championship in the year that Ducati essentially kicked him to the curb in favor of bringing Marc Marquez onto the bike.
Yeah, that was the big hubbub. Like it was like, who's going to go to the factory? Because we knew Bastianini was going bye, and it was like, okay, who's going to get that spot? Is it going to be Marquez? Is it going to be Martin? And Martin was always ahead in the championship, and it was like, it's got to be Martin. And Marquez brings something else though that. It was his first year back on first year on the Ducati. Mm-hmm. He was still learning it. He was showing, that he was competitive, and he's got a huge base of fans that all just traded in every Honda thing they owned and made everything red. So it's like, and Marquez said, I'm not going to a satellite team next year. Either you put me on the factory bike or I go somewhere else on a factory. And
that was the Rubicon. In like June, the question had been, who's Ducati going to pick? And Marquez forced their hand. I think it was June, maybe it was July, when he said, I'm not going to the team that Jorge Martin was on, Pramac. Like, it's factory bike or figure something else out. And that was, I don't know. Ducati loves nothing more than to sell a special edition Panigale. And like, if you put a 93 on a Panigale fairing, it's going to sell more bikes than Jorge Martin's number, just period. And that was the calculation,
Yep. And then, so then Martin went and won the thing and took the plate to Aprilia, and unfortunately, Martin he's out. But we can talk about that in a second. But all the other bikes, Japanese brands, struggled massively. They were not even in the running. I mean, you had Quartararo, who was a past MotoGP champion, was like bottom half of the grid every race. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's he was the highest finishing Japanese bike rider in the championship last year, Fabio Quartararo, and he was in 13th overall. Yeah. Which was like, and everyone was like, oh, bravo, that bike's not very good. 13th is a pretty good result.
Yeah. I'm, my opinion is like the resilience that guy had to not try to find something else is amazing. That he's sticking with Yamaha. Wow. Kudos. I mean, like, I really think if you put that guy on a Ducati, he's going to be brilliant.
Or an Aprilia. That was his option. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge Fabio Quartararo fan. I have been for a long time. And like, his option last year was Aprilia. And granted, it was going to be a third of the money. But I was kind of like, if you the Aprilia is a great bike. It doesn't really have a rider still. and we'll get to that in a second. But like, you know, man, that really would have put Jorge Martin in dire straits too if they had offered that ride to Fab. Like,
yeah, for sure. So there was all these team changes for 2025, like we're kind of getting to. Martin goes to Aprilia, Marquez goes to factory Ducati, Bastianini, who was a factory Ducati guy, who, you know, at a point was in the running for the championship. You know, like he's not slow, and you know, it was pretty crazy. Ducati's just like, no, we're done with you, and it was like, you know, and he started showing some real success towards the end of the season. So he went to a Tech 3 KTM, a satellite KTM team, for a guy that got, like, you know, was killing it.
He was fast. He was super fast. And I mean, he showed Jorge Martin up as a Jerez when he made that devilish pass on him.
Yeah.
But it's worth noting, and I think this is important, Marc Marquez beat him to third in the championship.
He did.
On a year-old satellite Ducati. And that's not for nothing. There's very little difference between the 24 and the 25 Ducati, but between the 23 and 24, there was a wide gulf.
There was.
The 24 bike has been referred to as like one of the greatest racing motorcycles of all time. And the 23 was merely pretty good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that kind of justifies Ducati's decision to not keep him around.
Yeah, very much so. So, and then you got, like, you know, like Miller, he was struggling on the KTM, and he's on a Pramac Yamaha, and it's like, oh man, that's gonna be a bummer for that guy, you know. But you know, we'll see. He you know, he did show a little bit of tenacity in the first round, which was rad. So, which we'll talk about in a second. But then there's some new riders in the group, and there's one that had some controversy, which was Iogura going to Trackhouse Aprilia. Trackhouse is a U.S. owned. They call themselves an entertainment company, but they're a racing team. You know, they have NASCAR and now they have MotoGP, and everyone was like, what's the deal? Why didn't you sign Roberts? He's an American Moto2 racer who's showing some success. We need an American in MotoGP. And they went, no, we're going to go with Iogura. But there's a reason, right?
He's fast. He's
fast.
Super fast.
You know, he's, you know, and we'll, you know, we'll talk about here just in a second. But he's probably one of the biggest surprises. So we'll just jump into round one. You know, there was a lot of surprises in round one. In practice and qualifying, dude, there was like Yamahas and Hondas hanging out at the top of the list, which is pretty different to see, right?
Mir was sitting there, and Mir on the Honda, who has just been, well, I mean, he went back to awful for the actual race results, but in testing and in the practices, he was up inside the top 10, which he couldn't have paid money for a top 10 in anything last year.
No. I mean, there was actually a point in free practice, he was third fastest. He was hanging up towards the top, and it's like, what's going on here? You know, and then in qualifying, he did pretty well as well. And then, you know,
and same thing for Quartararo on the factory Yamaha. I think that's a little different because people expect Fabio Quartararo to ride around a bike's shortcomings in a way that people don't really expect Joan Mir to. Yeah. So it's less of a surprise when Fabio shows up in the top 10. But like, it wasn't just that he like quickly entered the top 10 and then got knocked back out. Like, he came within an eye of getting into Q2, which is huge for the Yamaha, you know. And so it just shows that both the Japanese brands have made steps, but like, I think they need 2027 to actually like become competitive again. Cause like, well, anyway, that's probably a podcast for another time.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, and then Miller was ripping as well. And then, you know, he had a crash in the sprint, and then he started to fall back. But there was like some things like, oh man, he's kind of doing it on the Yamaha. Like, you know, it was exciting to see. But then, you know, there was Iogura, man. That guy first debut, MotoGP, first time, he's been on the bike for testing. So he's been on the bike 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
5 times. And he qualifies right up there at the top, and then he just kept it going.
Yeah. So I think if you look at his results in Moto 2, it's not terribly surprising that he was super quick. But, I think one of the reasons he was a controversial pick over Joe Roberts was that he did have a history in Moto 2 of being pretty streaky. Like, there were seasons where it was, he won the championship last year and in Moto 2, and for the second half of the season, he wasn't really anywhere. He made all of his bones in the first half of the season and then sort of fell off. But I don't know. He kind of strikes me as one of those dudes who, pretty solid in the lower classes, and then gets onto a GP bike, and it's like, oh, this dude was serious the whole time. You know what I mean? There are certain guys for whom the big bike just works better than the little ones do, and he may be one of them.
He may be one of them, and I mean he finished 5th in the GP, which is the highest debut performance from a MotoGP rookie since Marquez. So people are already kind of drawing the lines, is this the new, and we don't know yet, and we got to give him quite a few rounds to figure that out. But to come out of the gate that strong, it could be a fluke, or it could be the start of the next great thing.
It's worth noting it was 40 degrees Celsius in Thailand. Ayagura is an Asian rider. He grew up in the Asia Talent Cup, racing in all those races. So the heat where it was literally cooking the European dudes, he was just he's
I'm used to it. It's
right.
Fine.
It probably still sucked for him, but he was I at least know how to process this, or get out of a slipstream to cool off a little bit. So
yeah. So
that's the only devil's advocate. Otherwise,
yeah.
impeccable.
I mean, I right now I'm a Ayagura fan. I don't see the helmet right there.
Yeah.
So, I'm rooting for the kid. I think it's super awesome what he's doing, and I hope it keeps going. But let's talk about the front runners and the shakeup. So, Marquez or Jorge Martin, he's missing the first 2 rounds. So he got high-sided off the get-go on the Aprilia and hurt his right hand.
He hurt his right hand and his right hand and his left ankle, I think.
Yeah, right hand, left foot when he got chucked into space, which usually doesn't happen a lot on MotoGP bikes these days with all the traction control and stuff. And so he got hurt, and then he healed back up, and then he got hurt again in a supermoto training accident where he broke his left hand and had to have surgery.
His left scaphoid.
Scaphoid, yeah. So right here, which is a very slow thing to heal,
Yep. And he screwed up his other ankle too.
Yeah. All of his bendy bits are not bendy right now.
Not good.
Right.
Yeah. So he's out, which Aprilia is probably just oh my God, we have a bike with the number 1 plate on it, and
we can't run it,
and we can't even run it. So who's their hero now? It's not even their factory guys. Their factory guys weren't really anywhere. So who's it going to be then? I mean, Bez he did 6th in the race. So it's Ogura, man, on a satellite bike.
I mean, that really speaks to the quality of that dude. I like to believe it was the Gulf livery, the Steve McQueen
super
paint
rad
scheme.
Yeah.
But, Bezzecchi is adapting to a new bike this year, but showing what he showed on a Ducati, he should have been 3rd. Should have no been question. At least he should have been. Yeah.
He should have been ahead. He should have been ahead of Ogura, because same thing. Ogura is also adapting to a new bike. He's adapting to a whole new series.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He's not adapting to a new bike. He's adapting to a new This is like going from bungee jumping to space travel. From a Moto 2 bike to a MotoGP bike. It's literally double the horsepower. Yeah. A Moto 2 bike struggles to hit 170, 175, and a Moto 2 bike is literally 50 miles an hour faster at some tracks.
Yeah.
And so and they got carbon brakes as opposed to steel brakes, and this kid's just whatever.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's a motorcycle. Throw it on your knee and pin it. See what happens.
Exactly. So, So, I mean, those are the exciting parts, but then they're at the very top, there was actually very few surprises.
Right.
You know, Marquez, I mean, you've been kind of a Marquez fan for a while watching him ride. What did you think of Marquez's performance?
So like you said, there was very little surprise to it, although I was glad to see it happen because I started out as a Valentino Rossi fan, so for a long time I hated Marc Marquez. Then he got hurt, and now this whole like saga hero arc story of him coming back from the screwed up arm has caused me to cheer for him. Adversity always helps that. So coming into the season, I was pretty excited. I thought, he's on hands down the best racing motorcycle in the world right now. This is going to be trouble for everybody. But there's always that like little bit of doubt, right? Like no one has a propensity to throw it down the road like Marc Marquez does. He usually does it in practice. He loves to like break a finger in practice and miss the round. So there was some trepidation there, but then, all through testing, all through practice, all through everything, it was just like, oh no, like this is it's who's going to finish second. And so, yeah.
Adam, what did you think about it? Like about his performance?
My sentiments echo Aaron's. I'm a big fan of the guy who, kind of like Ken Roczen. Like you had a crazy career-altering injury in which your limb could very well have been amputated. It could very well, if he went to a hospital in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, they would have amputated his arm. So it's just cool to like see that kind of turnaround where like your career's over, but you still, for some reason, because like think about it, he could totally have retired and it would have been all good, and he still would have been a legend. But he didn't want to retire; he wanted to keep it going, and I think that's really awesome. So I don't know. I think you can't count that guy out, and he's got that crazy drive like that. You can't give people that drive. It's either you have it or you don't. So yeah, I would think that he's probably going to achieve more in his career.
Yeah, he's got the drive, and but he also has a still undeniable talent in racecraft. Like the thing where like he was leading the GP, so he owns qualifying, he owns the sprint race, and then he goes out and he just starts walking on everyone in the GP, and then all of a sudden he like sits up and he looks back and looks for his brother, who's in second place, by the way. His other, so two Marquez's, first and second, and he pulls over. He lets off the gas and lets his brother by, and everyone's like, "What the heck is he doing?" And then he sits back there and he stalks his brother, and then when it's time to make a move, he jets off and he's gone again. And it's like, what was that all about? And problem is that his front tire, the tire pressure was going to be too low, under the limits for the regulations. So there's a regulation in MotoGP regarding tire pressures that they have to remain within a certain range during the whole race. And hot air and cold air affects how much tire pressure you have on your bike. And so he's out in front of everyone. He's not in dirty air. He's getting cool air to cool, considering you're in Thailand and it's 40 degrees Celsius, on the track. I think the track temp was, some insanely high number where it's like 200 degrees, you know what I mean? Like egg frying temperature, but still the front tire is cooling and his tire pressure is going down. And he's like, if I stay at this level, I'm going to get penalized. So he slows down, he drops behind his brother, brings his tire pressure back up because now he's in the hot air. He's eating exhaust from a Ducati GP 2024, in his face. And he's like, okay, cool. And then he's like, okay, now I got to go get to the front again. And he just goes, rip, and he goes by his brother and just leaves him for dead.
Crazy.
Right. And his brother's like tires are wiggling, his rear tire's worn out, and he's gone. So
crazy.
I'm not a Marquez fan in character, I think, because I'm a super Rossi fan. And so I'm like, I hate that guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For him and Lorenzo and their whole thing and all these things. But he's undeniable, and I am a fan because of his skill, the way he thinks about racing, and his tenacity. All those three things, undeniable, and I will never deny his greatness, for sure.
I think last thing before we move on from that, because I think this is really cool. you talked about his racecraft, and in the interviews after the race, he was sitting there talking about the moment he rolled off. Mm-hmm. And not only did he have the presence of mind to be like, oh, shoot, my tires might be too low. I need to roll off and get behind Alex. He was doing the math of like, it's a certain percentage of the race that your tire pressure has to be above a threshold, right? It's not the whole time. So he's sitting there doing math that I would have trouble doing right now. Mm-hmm. Like while
he's going, okay, I'm on lap. I've done 7 laps and I've been below I'm at or below for this many laps. Percentage is that like he's doing
so I can pass Alex with 3 to go and I'll be fine. But if I pass him before that, I'm going to get penalized. And it's like, he's doing that on the back of a motorcycle that's generating however much heat at 200 miles an hour, thinking about not getting passed, thinking about when to pass someone, doing like not uncomplicated math in his head. And it's just like, dude, the like, I don't know. Athletes get a bad rap for maybe not being super intellectual, but like, I couldn't do that sitting at my desk with a pen and paper, and he's doing it on the back of a motorcycle.
Exactly. Yeah. Super rad. And, then his brother, runs second to him in both the sprint and the GP, which was super cool to see. And so, it's funny because you would see his dad like in one garage and then he's over in the other garage and he's at the other, like, you know what I mean? Like his dad's like, jumping back and forth between garages. It's like when Alex moved into the lead in the, then he jumped over into the Grassini garage and he's like, and then it goes back, then Mark gets back in the front. He's back in the all red garage, so, that was really, really cool to see. But then Bagnaia, like Pecco, like I'm a fan of Pecco and I really want to see him do better. And the dude had to go to Q2 for qualifying. You know
Q1.
what I mean?
He had to make it into Q2.
Sorry. He had to make it. He went to Q1 and he had to get to Q2, which is like insane. Like he should never be down there. Oh. You know what I mean? So there's 2 qualifying sessions, and the top 10 go to Q2, and then the rest have to go to Q1, and then the top 2 go into Q2 to get your position on the grid. And it's like, dude, this guy's down below the top 10 in qualifying.
Well, and he got so hosed because
I don't think he did. I'm going to say he didn't because he should have been on the inside of Morbidelli in that corner anyways. He was in the wrong place anyways. He screwed himself.
But hear me out here, because Pecco's style is always to like, he's never anywhere in the first practice that doesn't count towards whether you get into Q2. He just cruises around, figures out what the track's doing, figures out what his bike's doing, where he's at. And then the practice session where they start deciding who's going to go directly from practice to Q2, he lights off, and usually in the second half of the session. And he was doing that this time. Marquez went out and started setting fast laps the whole session, the whole 45-minute session. He's just metronomic. And Pecco's kind of messing around. And then, you could tell with the last 5 minutes of the session, he was going to go out there and set a hot lap. And then he got in yellow flag trouble, and then he got penalized. So he got penalized for that, and then he got behind the dude who was cruising on the racing line. Yeah. And he should have been in a different place, but
But I mean, that's also his problem with his racecraft is that he leaves it. He's like a procrastinator.
Yep.
And he's a successful procrastinator. And the pressure makes him rise to the occasion, but he never rises to the occasion when the pressure's not there.
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about a guy who finished third handily, right? As if he screwed up. And
exactly.
Nah,
he's still awesome. And I'm still a huge fan. And I think, before when we were talking about doing this podcasting and inviting Aaron on, me and him were bantering back and forth about who's going to win. So I think we'll save that surprise for a second, but let's start with Adam. Who's your favorite for 2025?
I don't know. I mean, I really like Marc Marquez, and just that whole story. And I know some people don't like him, but I don't know. It's just, I'd like to see him get another championship and just add to his legacy. And, I would like to see that. So probably Marc Marquez is probably my favorite rider,
Okay. So Aaron and I were talking, we were making the plan, and Aaron, your pick is obvious, I think.
Yeah. Marc Marquez. I don't really think it's a question.
Yep. And I am going to go with Pecco. And
Okay.
the only reason I'm going, it's not because I think Pecco is better or more talented, because he's not. It's absolutely clear. But there's an X factor with Marquez. He could still toss that thing and hurt himself. And so Aaron and I have a bet, $20. It's not a lot, but it's a pride thing. And so my angle is that I'm betting on Marquez crashing and ruining his championship rather than Pecco outriding him.
Okay. All right.
That can happen.
So I'll take that bet. $20 sounds awesome. Although I do want to just, part of the reason I'm going with Marquez is you're thinking that Marquez will throw it away with crashes, which is totally valid. We've seen him do it. This whole thing started because he crashed out of the lead of a race twice and hurt himself. And that was 4 years ago, and he hasn't been the same guy since. So I completely get it. However, both in 24 and 23, Pecco earned the dubious honor of having the highest number of crashes and still finishing that high in the championship. Like in 23, he won the championship with the highest number of race crashes ever done. And then last year, he almost equaled that record.
Yeah, but he also won the most races last year too.
He did. He won 11 races there. That is unassailable. But my point is, I would argue that Marquez crashes in practice when, as long as you don't get hurt, doesn't matter that much. Pecco crashes when it counts. We've seen him, he has a history of throwing it down the road during the race.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And unforced errors too. Like he could be in the lead and just toss it himself. And that's totally another thing. But I think what we haven't seen from Marquez yet is when Marquez was winning, he was pushing it to the limit because he was the man. Yep. And if he goes back to being the man, he's going to get back into his old ways. And that's where he's going to blow it. Yep. He's gone through the process of coming back up, and like you said, he's not the same rider, but that's because he's doing the climb. And once he gets to the top of the mountain again, like if he goes back to his old ways, he's going to fall off the mountain.
Yep, I think you're right, and he's too old to do things the way he used to do them. Right? Too old. He's 32. He's younger than all of us by we're old enough to be his dad, but he's not going to heal the same way. He's not going to bounce the same way. If he hurts himself like he did in 2020 ever again, stick a fork in it, get a job commentating, you're not a racer anymore. But I think the next two races are his to lose. Argentina is a track he loves. He made the first time he made Valentino Rossi look silly was at Argentina. And I hate to say that as a Rossi fan, I hate to say that, but he did. He did.
Rossi was getting old.
Yeah, and Marquez has raced at Circuit of the Americas 12 times and lost twice, and every other time he's won the race. So those are the next two races. Where we're going to decide whether you and I are going to be close or whether I just should take your money is round 4 in Qatar. That is Pecco's track. Marquez, relative to Mark's results, he's never gone well there. He's never particularly liked it. Pecco has shown in the 5 years he's been in MotoGP that he, for whatever reason, whether it's the nighttime thing, whether it's just the way that track is laid out, Bagnaia is a beast there. So if he can show Marquez his back fender by 15 seconds, like Marquez tried to do this weekend, then it's going to be a tight race.
Yep.
And it's also a long old season.
It's a long season.
We're going to be here till November.
Yeah. So and with that, I'm going to say we're gonna do a few check-ins with Aaron throughout the season. We'll probably do a midpoint and maybe a finale, or if it gets exciting, we might have him back on and talk some more MotoGP because we got to keep up with it. But there you go. That's who we think. And let's do kind of an over under. You set the line, Aaron, for Ogura. Where is he gonna finish the championship? Over under, and then you set the line, and I'm gonna take the over under. So you set the line, and I'm gonna take over or under.
Pardon me while I consult Google real quick, and I apologize for not having this number off the top of my head, but I need to look at Pedro Acosta, who everyone tipped as the greatest rookie since basically motorcycling was invented last year, finished 6th on a KTM. He had a string of great results, but 6. Ogura in his first race outfinished Pedro by like 5 places. Okay. So I'm going to set the line.
He's on a better bike too.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. I'm going to set the line at 5.
5.
5th.
Okay. That's actually a really good line. Well, as a gambler, I'm always an optimist.
Okay.
And I always go big. So I will take the over. I'm going to
You're going to take the over?
I'm going to say he's going to do 5, 5th or better.
5th or better. Okay. I think, man, if you think about it, like, that's not way outside the realm of possibility, right? Because you've got the top 3, I would say, regardless of how the top 2 finish, the top 3 are probably going to be Bagnaia, Marquez, and Marquez. I would guess, because those are the three best Ducatis on the grid. Everybody else is a little bit banged up or streaky. And then I'd honestly love to see Acosta on the KTM up there, but it's just not going to happen. And so then you're talking Aprilia, and Ogura might be Aprilia's best hope.
He might be.
We know Bez is streaky. Ogura's got that rookie mojo. He's got something to prove, and
Martin's starting, behind.
If he gets back by the time the European campaign kicks off in late April, I will be shocked. And if they haven't looked at what happened to Marquez in 2020 and sent armed guards to Martin's house to keep him there until his bone is healed, then they're stupid. I mean, they seriously need to put him in a cage until they're sure his scaphoid is healed.
Put him in a hyperbaric chamber. Let him cook.
He's 25, 24, something like that. He's got such a long... Anyway, that's a completely different topic.
Yeah. So anyway, I think if you would have set the line at 7, I'd be taking your money easily with the over. 5 is a really good line, and I think that's a really good line. So I'll take the over.
Let's do it.
I'll swing for the fences. We'll make another $20 on that.
Sure. All right. Cool. Good? Yeah. Because this way we'll even it out. We'll probably even it out.
Possibly. Adam, who do you think is going to walk away with the most money? Is it going to be me or Aaron?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I thought you were going to go under, Justin. I'm like, oh, he's going to go under, So I don't know. I think Aaron, but who knows?
I like, that's the thing. I'm gonna go big or hand my money to Aaron. But so anyway,
think about the glory you have on the line, though. I just took the easiest 2 bets in motorcycle racing this year, and you're like, dude, if you win, I should be giving you odds. I'm not going to, but I should be.
I'm that degenerate that's at the horse track betting on the long shot.
Hell yeah, dude.
Come on, come on, Santa's helper. Come on, Santa's helper.
This pull of the lever is going to hit.
I've seen it work for you, Justin. I've seen it hit for you, though.
Yeah, exactly. So
we'll find out in November.
We'll find out. So okay, so that's how we see the year going, and we're gonna lock it up there. And so closing thoughts: MotoGP is awesome. If you're not watching it, I don't know what you're doing. Even if you think that the racing is not the same as it was before, it's still an amazing race series, and you should be watching it. There's all kinds of stuff going on, like we said, all these ups and downs, and it's just not what's happening on the track. There's mid-season testing where some crazy stuff could come out. All of a sudden a bike could show up with some new feature after mid-season that you've never seen before, and it totally changes everything. We don't know. So
Yamaha could totally redesign its whole entire engine package,
Yep.
Wouldn't that be weird?
Just show up with a V4 all of a sudden, and so we'll see. So watch along with us. Yep. Let us know in the comments who you think is going to win in MotoGP, but also between me and Aaron.
Right.
And then let me know how I'm going to spend Aaron's money.
That's right. Top comment on how you're going to spend $40.
Yeah, 40 big ones. 40 big ones.
You got to send me a Marc Marquez hat.
Yeah, I think that's probably good enough for like 2 Subway footlongs at this point. But anyway, thanks for watching. Put your comments down below. We appreciate you listening and watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, and just engage with us. We'll talk back to you. We love talking to you. So we appreciate the support, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for joining us.